Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Future of Biz Tech. I'm your host, JC Granger, and I have another fantastic guest on the show with us today. And listen, if you end up loving this episode, please show your love and appreciation by following this podcast wherever you're listening, and be sure to give it a 5-star review, preferably with some nice comments behind it, because that is how other techies like you and I find cool podcasts like this. And today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing the CEO and founder of Airspeed, Doug Campbelljohn. Doug, so great to have you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you guys do.
Thanks for having us, JC. So Airspeed is a relatively new company. We just announced our seed funding. We are on a mission to help employees feel more connected and celebrated. And the way that we're going about doing that initially is through a family of Slack apps that we just released 5 to the Slack App Store that are all around how do you capture these moments of culture that became, have always been an issue, but became much more exacerbated during the times of COVID. So everything from how do you introduce yourself to your team, how do you celebrate wins with recognition, how do you make sure you're not missing any birthdays or work anniversaries, how do you make a meeting a little bit more fun in the beginning, maybe through an icebreaker, and finally, how do you see where everybody is in your company on a map? Super helpful if you're traveling a location and want to go meet up with some of your colleagues.
Mm-hmm. So who it would be kind of your perfect client? Obviously, being a Slack apps, anyone who uses Slack could use this. But where do you find, like, what industries do you find are gravitating more toward your product than others?
Yeah, so it's super early days. We literally just had our last Slack app approved about 4 weeks ago.
Oh, okay, it's that early then. Okay,
that early, yeah. We've got close to 1,000 customers who are who have downloaded the apps and implemented them. We've got over 40,000 users on the platform already in just a very short period of time. But we're seeing a wide range. It's everything from 10, 15 person companies through divisions of large companies. We've got some great logos on our website like Adidas and Rivian and ADP and folks like that.
Oh, Uber on there too, yeah.
Yeah, Uber's on there. And these are, as you said, the first criteria is you use Slack. Second criteria is that you care about culture. And so the way that we've designed it is that this doesn't have to be a top-down HR decision. This can be any person. It could be an administrator, a manager. It could be somebody in HR who just says, hey, I just want to get to know my team better. Typically, we'll install it into a channel just for their team, and it grows from there.
So what kind of motivates you to start this? I mean, were you at another company before and you found that it was just really hard to connect with people? I mean, just what was that kind of like villain origin story, if you will, right?
Yeah, I mean, the origin story is all about COVID. So my last company got acquired by LinkedIn. It's called FlipTop. We were doing machine learning for sales and marketing. Got acquired and I ran the Sales Navigator division, which was at the time was about a $250 million business for LinkedIn. Is now over $1 billion of their business. And I got recruited away to go be the general manager of Sales Cloud for Salesforce and thought that was an interesting gig. And my first day was the 1st of February, 2020. So 6 weeks later, the world looked like this and we're on Zoom. And on the one hand, I loved it. I never want to go back to an office 5 days a week, never again. I love the flexibility of remote work. We still, as a company, get together at least once a quarter, put everybody in a plane, go somewhere fun. But I love the ability to mix both. But the thing I didn't like was really not feeling connected to the people that I was working with, especially because I was, hadn't met everybody and I was relatively new to the environment. So we did all the same shit that everybody else did. We did, Zoom happy hours. We did Zoom cooking classes. We had lots of additional all hands meetings. We set up Slack channels for fun things. And that in the process, I kind of realized there's no system of record for culture inside companies. It's all these ephemeral things. It's sitting in a Google Drive folder that's an all hands deck. It's sitting in Slack channels that are like a continuously running river where things just washes downstream. And the idea of getting to know somebody beyond their LinkedIn profile became harder when you're not in the office and seeing everybody face to face. So how do you create these tools that help facilitate a lot of that interaction? And that's really where Airspeed came from.
So where does we talked a little bit before this about AI. Where does AI come in for this particular model that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm listen, I've been in tech for a long time, over 30 years. I'm more excited about what AI can do than anything I've seen in my lifetime. And I think that what is so exciting is the ability to interact with a lot of these systems on a very, using human language, and to not be able to say, I have to know how to operate a certain menu or user interface or make that stuff happen. And also to be able to really humanize a lot of the interactions. And it's not a replacement. I think the Microsoft branding of Copilot, for example, is brilliant because it's saying, hey, this is an assistant, this is an augmentation of who you are as a human. But I'll give you a couple of just simple examples. For our administration system, we started to build the classic, hey, had to have a whole bunch of reports and dashboards of, how do you figure out how many users you are and what apps are being used and all that kind of stuff. And when ChatGPT came out and we just took a step back and said, how is this going to affect us? We said, that's dead, right? I think companies like Tableau and others are going to see a whole new guard that's going to come in, because all we're going to have is a simple little chat box that says, what do you want to know, right? And that today is sitting on all of our data, so we can tell you, hey, what are the most interesting, who are we as a team? Like, describe us from what you know, or who's got work anniversaries coming up this month in my team, or what's the most unusual interest we have in the company. So there's just a bunch of stuff where you can kind of query the system that way in an interesting way. The other one is just like goofy and fun. Like we have, you're writing these birthday cards, for example, or a work anniversary card. You could say, hey, I know that JC loves beer and skiing, right? Write me a funny greeting card message, or write me something in the style of a pirate, and just like these things that are just bringing a lot of creativity and levity and boosting what you get, as opposed to what we all see in Facebook, happy birthday, Doug, happy birthday, Doug, happy birthday, Doug.
Sure.
So I think there's a number of ways that these are going to go affect what we can go do, and ultimately give us a lot more insight as to who we are as a team and as a company.
So your program, your software in the plugins into Slack and whatnot, it has a culture side to it, and there's an AI side to it. I have a question too, is any part of your system, does it help with preventing things from going wrong, so to speak? Like, so for example, I've seen things that pop up on like Instagram. Meta released a version of this not too long ago, where if you were going to type something and it thought that might be inappropriate, or it flagged a word, it would say, hey, are you sure you want to send this? When you have a software that's culturally based, and you got people just kind of, free gaming on the keyboard, are there any protections in place for the user? Like, just say, hey, listen, you're about to put this on the record, and our system has decided that maybe given the culture of this particular company, maybe these types of words or types of things may not be appropriate. Is that something you're either doing or that you plan on doing?
I think it's something that's interesting for the roadmap. I mean, Slack is a great example that has none of those controls, and obviously it's just a big channel where lots of people are communicating in those ways. But I can imagine a lot of more of those kind of smart systems that say, hey, you sure you want to compose it this way? Or certainly being able to flag stuff automatically and not wait for user intervention to flag something, to have AI help with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, cool. I was just curious because I'd started seeing a little bit of that, and it's kind of like helping people get out of their own way in advance can, nobody wants an issue. So if it's preventive maintenance is always better, right? So you guys are new, and you're on this podcast. So I know you're doing PR. What other? I'm a marketing guy by trade, right? So I always ask the marketing question. What other types of marketing and ways you guys are getting yourself out there so people even know about Airspeed, other than stuff like this?
Yeah, so we really want to kind of build our blog into a great resource for people who are kind of on the forefront of remote and hybrid work. So we've conducted an interview series with a number of leaders about how they are handling the issues of remote work. And I think, and I'll keep going, but one thing to just point out there that I think has been interesting, an observation. When my last company was acquired by LinkedIn, we went from a, just under 30-person company to suddenly 10,000 plus employees, right? And it was a bit of a culture shock. And I think the biggest aha for me in the first few months was realizing how deliberate you had to be in cascading communications. So I would watch Jeff Weiner, the CEO, roll out things to his executive team, then roll it out to the top 250 leaders in the company, then roll it out to the entire company and all hands, and then repeat, rinse, and lather that stuff with a lot of deliberation. And I think we've taken culture for granted in the past and just said, hey, we're going to get people together and we're going to do some fun activities and it's just going to be organically happen. And I think it's always been an issue because we've always had remote sales offices or remote development offices or even people on different floors of the same building or different buildings. But now more than ever, we have to be as deliberate about cascading culture as what we do in terms of cascading communications. And so the blog is one way where we've gone and surveyed about 1,600 leaders, executives, and individual contributors, and published the results of that in the paper about how are people wrestling with the issues of remote work. We've talked, continuing this series on the blog, and really just want to start highlighting people who are great culture champions inside their companies and what are the hacks that they're doing. So that's going to be a big megaphone for us. Obviously, coming from LinkedIn, we're big fans of LinkedIn advertising, and so we've been playing around with that and love all the kind of information that we see out of that, and have been very pleasantly surprised in the tests that we've run there in terms of super high click-through rates and super high kind of conversions into downloads. And then, things like this and kind of getting the word out. I think for a lot of folks in the Slack App Store, they just publish in the Slack App Store and then just kind of watch downloads happen. And we're trying to be a little bit more deliberate than that.
I saw you had a feature on there. There was a maps feature that you can look at. You can look at the US or probably another country and then see where everyone's at. Just out of curiosity, do you guys get any feedback where you're finding that people, especially big companies that have like a lot of employees, do you find that if people actually looking and seeking out other people within the company that live close to them for their own kind of one-to-one meetups, even if they're not in the same department? Like, is it too new to have that kind of data back, or I'm just curious?
So anecdotally, yes. So we've got examples of customers who have said, I love this approach, by the way. One HR department said, hey, listen, we're going to go create a kind of a face-to-face budget, right? And so we're going to allocate, if you've got more than 10 people within, call it a 50-mile radius, we're going to allocate X dollars per month or per quarter for you guys to go get together for a beer or a pizza or go, to an event or something like that. And the way that they're doing that is a Maps application that we have. So you can basically zoom in just like you would in Google Maps, Zillow, whatever like that, down to a specific region and say, oh, here's all the people that are part of this. Let me go create a new channel for them. These are the New York peeps or the San Francisco Bay Area folks. And so that's a way that they're kind of understanding this without having to do huge slice and dicing in their HR database. But the other thing I find is super powerful, and this was always the case for me at Salesforce or LinkedIn and previous companies, is I'd be jumping on a plane to go visit a customer. Let's say I'm going to Boston. I don't even know like what folks are in my group or outside my group in that area. How do I go zoom down that area and say, I'm going to be there between Tuesday and Thursday. Anybody want to go grab dinner? Anybody want to go grab a beer? Like, and be able to do that. So we kind of take you out of Slack into this, very rich web map experience. And then you can kind of zoom in on what you want. And then you can go back and message folks directly in Slack to go make that face-to-face happen.
And how are you guys monetizing off this? Is it per download, per seat, just as of right now anyway? And I know, the podcast can age, right? So I'll say to the listeners, if you're listening to this a year later, it could be totally different. But as of now, as a startup, how are you planning to monetize off this?
So right now it's free. We're in the early access period, so everything's free. The way we will eventually monetize is to have multiple tiers. So there'll be a free forever tier. So if you're, a 25-person company, you're probably still going to just be able to use all of the Airspeed apps for free. The next tier up will be, a modest per user fee. Kind of sub $5 per user per month. And that'll allow you to do all kinds of customization. So, we call our work anniversaries this, we want to be able to modify the messages that are going out, having more storage for media, things like that. And then the final tier is we're doing all the HR and system integrations. So you can just kind of plug into Workday, plug into Bamboo HR, whatever you're using, and automatically sync this stuff with your hierarchy. And that'll be a slightly higher tier.
Very cool. Well, in the aspect, in the spirit of the future of biz tech, title of this podcast, let's talk about the future a little bit. So, first question is, where do you see this industry going? Right? I mean, Slack apps with AI, right? Because you guys are picking a particular lane in it. There's all sorts of lanes that can be done with this idea. Where do you see that, and maybe also specifically just remote engagement, I guess, would be the overall term for it in the next 5 or 10 years? Like, I mean, and then that might be too, honestly, with AI, we should probably say the next 5 to 10 months,
Right.
of how fast. I don't even know why I said years at this point, but where do you see the future of you plus your competitors and other people in the space when it comes to that?
Yeah, so for us, Slack is an entry point. Slack is not the end destination. So ultimately, as I said, we want to create what we call this kind of operating system for culture, kind of a system of record of all these events. And so I think, you'll see us having interfaces and go through different platforms, having full web and mobile capabilities, all of that in the future. But I do think that what's interesting for the future of biz tech is, I had this very interesting timing where I was at Salesforce when the Slack acquisition was announced. And so before I had left Salesforce, I spent a decent amount of time kind of thinking about Slack and how it would impact not only Sales Cloud, but Salesforce in general, and spent a lot of time with Mark and others there. And I think one of the things that Slack is a really interesting playground for testing these things out is it is a messaging user interface. And I think one of the things that Stuart got right was, for the past, 4 decades, we've had this forms over database kind of model of the world. So all CRMs are like fill in a bunch of fields in a browser, or on a piece of desktop software, and it writes back to some server in the cloud. And I think what Slack did is say, not only this is just a way for you and I to message each other like we would in iMessage or WeChat, but it's actually a user interface to your applications. So very simple, pre-ChatGPT, just imagine you've got Slack and you want to say, hey, like, how big is the Boeing deal that's closing at the end of this quarter? I shouldn't have to log into Salesforce to do that. I just go into Slack. It's connecting to a bot. It's fetching that information. It's feeding it back to me. Now suddenly fast forward that and say, now I can go apply LLMs, apply these large language models. And now I can start to do some really interesting what if stuff, right? So what is my biggest white space opportunity, right? What are the customers that are the highest risk of churning this quarter? What are the customers, and I'm obviously talking in the sales context here, not Airspeed per se, but I think this applies to every single vertical you can imagine. I think the user interface is going to look like Slack. It's going to look like a chat window you type stuff into, which is what ChatGPT has shown us, and Bard and others now. And it's going to be able to pull information not just from a single system, but from multiple systems across the organization. So, to give you a glimpse of where we're going, right now I can go query, as I mentioned, all of the data that we're collecting. Now you suddenly add in, Slack integration, you add in Google Calendar, Gmail integration, you add in HRIS, HR system integration. Now you can start to do some pretty interesting things like, hey, just looking across my company, what are the teams that are actually seem to be working really well together and the teams that might have some disconnects? Or, where do I think I might have attrition risk? Or a lot of these kind of larger questions you might ask are going to be where I think a lot of this tech goes.
That's interesting. Let me ask you this. Given that you're in this kind of new space, right? I mean, everything you're doing is relatively new if you think about it, not just the company, but just the concepts that you're following.
Yep.
Who are the people in the industry or outside of it that you find yourself following the most for inspiration, technologically, business-wise, whatever? I'm curious who, people follow you probably given your expertise. So who do you follow?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to have some great mentors along the way. Way back when in a company called Epiphany, there was a guy named Steve Blank who kind of been the lead startup movement. more recently, great pleasure working with folks like Reid Hoffman and Ryan Roslansky and Jeff Weiner at LinkedIn, and then obviously folks like Brett Taylor and Mark Benioff at Salesforce. So, I pay a lot of attention. If you haven't listened, for example, to Reid's set of kind of posts, blogs and podcasts around AI, especially given his, Greylock's investment in that space. They're one of our investors, just for full disclosure. But it's fascinating to see where the future of that is going to go. And I think even Reid writing a book in conjunction with ChatGPT or interviewing ChatGPT and having the responses converted in text to speech, and you listening and going like, wait a minute, I have to remind myself this isn't a person he's talking to. This is just text that was generated by a LLM that is being read back by the computer.
Gonna get real gray real soon.
Yeah, it gets real gray real fast. And so I would say, listen, the job of a CEO is pretty straightforward. Someone wants to describe it as MVP, but it doesn't stand for most valuable player. It stands for money, vision, and people. And I would say probably in reverse order is the most important part. So I spent a chunk of my time focusing on, do we have the right people on the bus, and are those people, clear as to what they're doing, and are we building kind of like the legendary, Lakers or Chicago Bulls kind of class team. I spend time obviously making sure that we have plenty of money in the bank, and we're not going to run out. But most of my time these days is saying, what's the vision and how is that going to continue to expand? And I'm a big believer in being kind of, firm on the end state, but loose on the details of how you get there. So our vision from day one has been, our mission has been, how do we help employees feel more connected and celebrated? But I'm spending inordinate amount of time digging into ChatGPT and Bard and all the AI stuff. And we're spending time as a team even going through these thought exercises of how we can go leverage this in an interesting way. Because my assumption is all of the existing players are going to add ChatGPT-like functionality as a sidebar onto their products. So what are really the opportunities for startups to really disrupt the old guard? And that's where we start.
So last question. My audience likes to kind of have the inside scoop, right? They want to be the first to hear things. Is there anything on your roadmap that's coming out soon that you might be able to give us a little preview on? Something cool coming out?
So I think the thing, and depends on when this airs again, but we have our sixth app is about to drop called Coffee Talk. And Coffee Talk is about applicable as you get to mid-size or larger companies. It's how do you get to know the people inside the company, and then that might just be, hey, I want to just meet other people on my team. Like when I was running the Sales Navigator team, that was hundreds of people. Obviously, lots of people I didn't have face-to-face meetings with. Or it might be, hey, listen, I just want to meet people who are outside that team. I want to meet people in different geographies. I want to get to know more folks inside of the company and build my network. And we see this even in a lot of communities, like a lot of women in technology, Slack communities, a lot of business development, sales communities, et cetera, are using some of the Airspeed apps right now. There's a product out there called Donut, that's been doing this for a little while in Slack, which has achieved great success, and I give them a tip of the hat. But I think that it's not particularly intelligent. It just kind of randomly matches you to people in a channel that you join. So we're actually leveraging AI to ask you two questions. What kind of people do you want to meet? And what do you want to talk about? And based on the answers to that and the people who've joined the channel, we're making smart matching decisions, almost like a dating app. Like, here's 3 candidates. Who do you want to go meet with? And then not only do we do that, we kind of have a better version of Calendly to actually facilitate that, where rather than just saying connect your calendar and find a slot, we just say, what are some good times for you? Or just connect your calendar and we'll take care of it. So you can just say, hey, look, Friday afternoons are generally pretty good for me, and we take it from there. So we match you the right people. We tell you some interesting things you might want to talk about, and we actually find a time for you to meet.
I like that. That's cool. I'm glad we got to get a little preview of what's dropping next there. Listen, how can people reach you in particular if they maybe some higher end deals, or the company itself online or in other ways?
Yeah, so we're at getairspeed.com. I'm just the letter D at getairspeed.com. I always say, feel free to email me directly or come through the website. We've got chat and we can connect you to whatever function you want, whether it's we have customer support folks and customer success folks that can kind of handhold you through the whole getting onboarded process to any kind of partnerships with sales and marketing.
And that's awesome. And listen, for everyone out there listening, again, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, some cool writing behind it, so other techies like us can find it and enjoy learning about all these amazing and helpful B2B softwares on the market today. Doug, thank you so much for being on the show. And I look forward to checking out your apps. I use Slack too.
All right. Thanks, JC. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.